messages of support from different people that have supported us over the campaign. In particular now, the campaign group of Labour MPs. I spoke earlier about the people that had signed the motion. They've been wonderful for us. I've spoken at lots of places around the country with members of the Labour Party, and it's been unnecessary for me to attack the Labour leadership so savagely as the job being done by the members of the Labour Party themselves. We're very, very glad. He's got to go in a minute. I'm putting him on now. We're very, very glad about this war, from the point of view of the media, has been, in my view, the articles of Edward Pearce. I won't say that I expected them. I've been following Edward's writing for a long time, and in a way, his attack on the war came as a complete surprise, and all the better for it, if I may say so. I don't think that any of the articles that have been written on the war have been so devastating as his, perhaps because they were so surprising coming from that source. And he delighted us all at the Conway Hall a few weeks ago, and I hope he's going to delight us all again. Edward Pearce.
Mr. Chairman, friends, thank you for that. Nothing that's said about me matters on this occasion, but one thing was said to me, which might be worth bearing in mind. I got rung up by a news desk this morning to ask, well, were we having this meeting? I said yes. Get the details from Paul. I couldn't organise a face flannel. I just get hired. I regard myself as a sort of hired mouth. I leave other people to organise things. But, he said, what's it for? I'd be tempted to say that this meeting will be held as a memorial service for approximately 150,000 people killed to no rational, sane, good end. If you wanted to sum this meeting up in a sentence, that would be it. When we comment on the media, we comment on the absence of reports, on the news we didn't get, on the information which came hurriedly, quickly, and very nastily at the end of a long period of quite magnificent restraint. We've seen a fly-past in formation of news editors. There is a doctrine which grew up in my mind and grew up in actual practice in the long reign of Lady Thatcher, which is particularly when she was trying to change the Official Secrets Act for one actually more repressive than that, which took some doing. And it's the phrase I gave it, and everyone is welcome to it. It is the doctrine of ministerial convenience. The doctrine of ministerial convenience, and of the convenience of our gallant allies and of the commanders in the field gallantly bombing that traffic snarl-up. It has been served to perfection by newspapers who, in the immortal words of a Tory MP I'm personally rather fond of, have seen that it was the duty of the press to engage in a team effort with the forces. We've had a team effort, all right. We've had the Hitchens, we've had my old friend Andrew Neil, we've had all the glories of the Express, we've had the Evening Standard in all its splendour. We know that our lads are gallant even when they're bombing people unable to defend themselves. We know that people who speak against it are members of the loony left and friends of Saddam. We know that opposition is based entirely upon devotion to the rightness and goodness of Saddam, Hitler, and the Antichrist. We know that. We also know, to underline something said already, that the only people who opposed Saddam in principle in this country, whether in press or in the House of Commons, were loony leftists and pinkos. It was that wild man, David Ellis Thomas, who 5-6 years ago was brushed massively aside by Minister John Wakeham when he raised the question of Saddam. It was Tamdiel who was snubbed as mightily and continues to be damned as a loony leftist for having quite crazily said quite imperfectly lunatic, irresponsible, absurd Scottish laird way, that Saddam, being the sort of man he is, he wouldn't be surprised, wouldn't Tam, if he didn't blow up those oil wells. There is an item of news of sensational import scarcely ever reported after the first day. They're still burning and nobody is writing about them. The 2 oil slicks are still floating down to Rio, and after the second day nobody is writing about them. Do you recall the coverage given to non-controversial spillages like the Exxon Valdez? A point where I would differ with some of my more extreme left-wing friends who see a capitalist conspiracy in anything. This was the doing of a piece of capitalism. It was worth 15 days Ace News coverage on page 1. The flaming oil wells and the slick are page 27 on the turned down column, and you know it. The coverage that has been given has illustrated that old Humbert Wolf saying, "You cannot hope to bribe or twist, thank God, the British journalist, but seeing what the man will do unbribed, there is no reason to." There used to be a nice little programme, inoffensive, pleasant Christian programme called An Act of Worship for Schools. What we have had over 4 weeks has been an act of worship for editors. We have done our compliant, subordinated bit. We have done our bit in the team effort that Mr. Howarth bid us. But it's harder to talk about this in a light or ironic or sarcastic way than it was when the war was only a notion at the back of a planner's psychopathic mind. You can joke about things that haven't happened, but I defy anybody to look at page 2 of the Observer yesterday and see that Jack Frost picture of an Iraqi soldier burned to death and see anything funny in anything. Let's just dwell a little bit on that man. We don't know his name, but we can make the supposition that he's a junior officer. He probably comes from a peasant background. He's a conscript. He has no part in any of the crimes of Saddam held up for us to understand as our reason for war. He is to be distinguished from a civilian only by the thin line of coercive circumstance that put him into a uniform, put a sergeant behind him and pointed him in a direction. And he stands there grinning at us in the rictus of a man consumed in third-degree burns and his flesh turned into a sort of mud that is baked and caked into a jagged Jack Frost effect. It is the most horrible picture I have ever seen, but I am very glad that I have seen it. I think that it will linger on the mental eye of people the way those 2 pictures from Vietnam did. The one of the soldier, the brigadier, shooting the man in the head with a bullet pressed against the temple, the other of the burned child running down the street. We cannot understand without icons. They may simplify, they may telescope, but they tell nothing but the truth. And if we had been able, if the ordinary mass, the general mass of ordinary reasonable people, including all those who passively and for perfectly honourable reasons went along with the war, had they been able by some miracle to see that picture, they would not, in Wilfred Owen's words, have taken on the old lie, dulce et decorum est pro patria mori. They would not have believed the shaming and degraded afflatus of the hired men who talked all of us into war. The hired hallelujah chorus who have given us a service of affirmation for war. The shame of the press is a twofold sort. There is the willing cooperation with censorship and self-censorship and desperate attempts to avoid what Orwell called thought crime in all those suppressions, all those censorings, those occasional firings, and the eternal work of that good, decent Thatcherite patriots, the Spike. And there is, on the other hand, all the drum-rolling jingoistic and degrading calling to war that has come from men happier with 2 syllables than 3 and 1 than 2, men who think in 80-point, men in white hats looking for whatever it is a man has got to do and then finding somebody to do it for them. I sometimes worry about collective nouns, you know, a pride of lions. What's a collective noun for editors? Degradation. Look at it and look at what has been done. Wonder how much truth you've been told. Wonder how it is in a country that affirms over and over again that it's a democracy, that so much silence, so much lies, and so much gaiety in the face of killing, in the making of that dead man's face, can take place. Ask yourselves why the conscience, the simple, uncomplicated, unglorious conscience and imagination, which can take on the fact that doing the gallant thing, even if you do it by all the honourable rules, will mean a lot of death, why that has not functioned. Ask yourselves why it has been possible, without adverse comment, without censure, that the last phase of the war could take place. The last phase of the war was no phase and no war. It was an execution. It was the bombing of a car park. It was morally indistinguishable. The bombs that fell from the air on hapless, defeated men trying to retreat are divided by no line of no fineness from the bombs put in cloakrooms to kill civilians. We're talking about the exercise of terror as an instrument of state. When Mr. Bush, who is not, or who does not wish to be a bad man, and who perceives good purpose in himself, uses euphemism, uses all those words that Paul quoted, words which Orwell said in another context fall upon the meaning like soft snow. When he uses all those words and conjures up being historically not terribly literate, and getting an awful echo of Japan with this phrase, New World Order. Let us remember that whatever diplomatic moves and military moves come out of it, they will have begun with that mud-caked face, with a mud actually made of human flesh. They will have been made with that, to the nearest figure we can hope to quote, 150,000 dead, the population of Bolton, the population of Darlington, the population of Harrow. Decent-sized group of people, here last month, not here this month, dead and forgotten. The New World Order will have begun with that deliberate act of destruction, that crime committed for a high purpose and for what Mr. Bush calls what is right. I love that phrase, what is right. There's an echo across generations of Presbyterian teachers. What is right? You can construct, of course, an ironical and comic picture of the New World Order. You can make a very good conservative case against it. You can say that it's about as logical and likely to happen as prices and incomes policy, even in the hands of Roy Hattersley. That there is about as much prospect of making Arabs who want to do X do Y as there is of prices staying down when they want to go up, even if Roy Hattersley tells them to stay down. There is a fundamental absurdity, theatre of war, theatre of the absurd, theatre of blood, whichever it is. There is a fundamental absurdity in the undertaking, but there is also a massive arrogance. I am no anti-American, no very great leftist, but I recognize an imbalance in the world and an arrogance within parts of American government which, frankly, only Americans can fight most effectively against, which says there is nobody now to stop us laying down de facto rules. Was this a real war against Saddam, they will say to themselves? No, of course not. Saddam was a pipsqueak, a grade 4 bandit temporarily given extra stars to let him pass in a bad light as a grade 2 bandit. But what we, the Americans, have done is demonstrate that we can kick ass. We kicked ass, all right. We burned it off. And the world knows, and the Arabian Peninsula knows, that we are in charge. Knows that acceptable, undemocratic, feudal autocracies with very, very frail eggshell political systems have the backing of all the ass-kicking, nuke-dropping, face-burning power that can be called up on behalf of democracy, quote unquote democracy, and that the United States is a colossus in the Middle East and must and will be obeyed. The Americans are proceeding along a course which, to my mind, has two possibilities. One, their humiliation along the lines of the Lebanon, because terror would be used against them, a fearful thing, but what they might expect. Vast hatred laid up against them, symbolized in the fact that a man in India has made $1 million in a week from selling pictures of Saddam at 1 rupee 50, not because the Indians like Saddam, but because my enemy's enemy is my friend, and that is how Indians feel. There is a great war of feeling, a great war of antipathy being built between the Third World and the First World. So one possibility is that the Americans will run into colossal problems, colossal hatreds, and will get themselves badly singed and will pull back. The other alternative, and I don't know which is worst, is that they will succeed, and that men starting out with a purpose they could morally rationalize themselves will end up with a single-minded act of cold-hearted aggression. The argument that we undertook when we started is not one that we have lost. The war itself was a battle. The state of the world is one of greater fear for the loss of freedom, for the assertion of autocratic central power, for the tyrannizing impulse of men whose fingers itch for the things against which there are now no checks and no restraints. And we know that if the Americans should go too far by all the standards they or we set, or thought we set, you can rely upon the British press to burst into a ripple of excited, girlish applause. There is no wrong the British press will not applaud. The fight, if the fight comes, will occur in America. The role of Britain, I, in the past, summed up with a remark that we are a tin can attached to the tail of a dog, only this is a tin can with a silencer.
Well, our next speaker is invited purely on the basis of